Boris Johnson's cabinet clear-out. All change at the Foreign Office, Justice and Education too.
Are we going the wrong way?
Black belt Raab just avoids the chop by demotion, but Liz Truss takes his place. Nadeem Zahawi gets education after Williamson is finally pushed, and Nadine Dorries is the new Secretary of State for Culture.
It was Boris Johnson's afternoon of the long knives, an absolutely ruthless reshuffle and culling of ministers. What does it all mean? I'll tell you.
Also on News at 10 tonight, a big announcement on global security from the White House and Downing Street. In the next few minutes, President Biden set to unveil a new alliance with the UK and Australia to counter China. Rohit will be here to talk us through it. Meanwhile, former IS bride Shamima Begum pleads for forgiveness and offers some advice on security for the Prime Minister.
You are clearly struggling with extremism and terrorism in your country. I think I could very much help you in your fight against terrorism because you clearly don't know what you're doing.
Broadway's back. Emma on the Big Apple's big reopening that's hitting all the right notes. And what lies beneath the astonishing discoveries at a dig under the ruins of an ancient church.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. It had been a long time coming, but when it did this afternoon, Boris Johnson's reshuffle was bigger and more brutal than expected. The biggest change was at the Foreign Office. Liz Truss, a favourite of the Conservative grassroots, supplanted Dominic Raab, he of the Foreign Holiday during the fall of Afghanistan. He becomes 3 jobs Raab, Deputy Prime Minister, Justice Secretary and Lord Chancellor by way of consolation. Michael Gove is the new Housing, Communities and Local Government Secretary and unofficial Minister for Levelling Up. To no one's great surprise, Gavin Williamson was sacked at Education. Vaccines Minister Nadeem Zahawi got the tick of approval there. Naturally, the Prime Minister believes his new cabinet ministers are doers who will rally to his cry, let's get on with the job.
Reshuffle day when all eyes are trained on this door. In Downing Street, photographers craning for the best view. Outside Parliament, ministerial cars waiting for the call.
Who's out?
The Prime Minister never more powerful than at this moment. And behind him in the Commons, absences on the front bench. No Gavin Williamson and no Dominic Raab. The first hint of who was out and who was on the move.
Are we going the wrong way? That way. Sorry, my mistake.
The Foreign Secretary had good reason to delay his entry, looking grim-faced as he walked up Downing Street.
Foreign Secretary, are you moving jobs?
Shortly after, a noticeably cheerful-looking Liz Truss emerged with his old job.
I'm delighted to be appointed Foreign Secretary to promote a positive outward vision of global Britain, which is going to deliver for people right across the UK.
So with Liz Truss getting a big promotion to the Foreign Office, Dominic Raab has been demoted to the Department of Justice, replacing Robert Buckland, who's been sacked. Gavin Williamson is also out as Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi rewarded with his job. Priti Patel, though, stays at the Home Office, Rishi Sunak too as Chancellor and Sajid Javid in Health. But Michael Gove has been given the housing brief, where Robert Jenrick is another to lose out. Peter Cardwell has worked for 4 cabinet ministers.
I think it is a bigger reshuffle than a lot of people were expecting, and I think that is something which has shocked a lot of people in Westminster. Certainly the swiftness and brutality of this. Some very big names there. Robert Buckland, who I worked for, Robert Jenrick, of course, as well, and Gavin Williamson. Gavin Williamson, of course, no huge shock, I suppose, but I think this is bigger than a lot of people are expecting.
Number 10 have said these moves are about creating a team focused on unity and levelling up across the country. The Prime Minister will also have been worried about doing anything that would create too much disunity on his backbenchers.
That might have something to do with why Priti Patel is one of the great survivors of this reshuffle.
You pleased to be still at the Home Office?
And why the role of Deputy Prime Minister has been added to Dominic Raab's new job.
Fantastic, looking forward to getting going.
Michael Gove, past master of multiple roles, has the additional task of making levelling up mean something. Nadine Dorries, one-time I'm a Celebrity contestant,
If where the people are is watching reality TV, that's where we should be.
has emerged from this jungle with the culture, media and sport brief. This autumn shake-up has seen 10 cabinet positions change hands, with 4 sacked altogether. More junior roles will be announced tomorrow, but there will already be those tonight licking their wounds and plotting their next move. Romilly Weeks, News at 10.
Well, let's go over to Robert now, who's preparing for his Peston programme coming up just a bit later. Robert, evening to you. I mean, this is a moment of sort of supreme power for the Prime Minister, isn't it? Feels like a total reset after Brexit and the pandemic. What's it for?
So, Boris Johnson at his most ruthless. Actually, the opposition and the media have been calling for the heads of Gavin Williamson and Robert Jenrick for months, and up to now, Boris Johnson has sort of taken the view he's not going to be bossed around by others, but now they've gone. Dominic Raab, Foreign Secretary, criticised for being on the beach at the start of that great retreat from Afghanistan. He's been demoted to Justice Secretary. Yes, he's got the sort of consolation prize of Deputy Prime Minister. I think it's probably worth reminding all of you that Deputy Prime Ministers almost never end up with the top job. So, I mean, Dominic Raab definitely taken a blow here. And then, you know, promotion of arch loyalists like Liz Truss and Nadeem Zahawi. It's also credited with one of the things that Boris Johnson likes to boast about, which is the vaccine rollout as you know, erstwhile vaccines minister. Why has he done this on top of some other very big recent statements? Funding for the NHS, funding for social care, that very controversial increase in national insurance, and only yesterday a plan for COVID this winter that is designed to avoid a further lockdown if at all possible. I'll tell you what it's all about. It's about general election planning. Ministers have been saying to me for weeks they think Boris Johnson wants a general election in 2023. That doesn't feel all that far away now, does it? So, yep, this is about essentially putting in place what he thinks are the building blocks for another general election. Lord help us.
Robert, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, as the new Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, will be responsible for dealing with the crisis in social housing that we've been reporting on in detail here on ITV News over the past 6 months. And Daniel Hewitt, of course, has been leading our investigation and joins me now. And we've had quite a lot of housing secretaries, haven't we?
Yep.
Dan, what do you think about this new arrival?
Yeah, 4th in 4 years since Grenfell. Explains a lot, doesn't it, Julie? Michael Gove is increasingly a man that Boris Johnson has turned to in a crisis to fix big problems. Our reporting over the last 6 months has shown a crisis of epic proportions and lots of problems that need fixing. Michael Gove is one of the kind of the big beasts in this government. It may point towards Boris Johnson taking the issue of housing a lot more seriously than he has. He has, though, 3 big challenges. The first, clearly what we've been reporting on, a crisis in social care, people living in squalid, poor homes, their issues, their complaints not being listened to. There was promise after Grenfell to change the regulation, to give tenants more of a voice. That hasn't happened. The second challenge he has is over cladding, getting that dangerous cladding off those buildings, but who's going to pay for it? And the third challenge of planning. We need to build more houses in this country. Tory MPs do not like the planning reforms that the government has so far tried to push through. Michael Gove will be trying to convince them. But as I say, 4 housing secretaries in 4 years. Michael Gove also brings with him the task of saving the union and delivering Boris Johnson's levelling up programme. He has a lot on his plate. Can he really do all of this as the housing secretary? Big question.
OK, I know you'll keep a very close eye on it for us. Thank you very much indeed, Daniel. Thanks. Well, the Prime Minister's day didn't end when the last of his reshuffled ministers departed Downing Street this evening. In the last few minutes, he's made a joint announcement with President Biden and Australia's Prime Minister on how the 3 countries will deal with the threat to Western security from an ever more powerful China. They have agreed to share technology on defence, artificial intelligence and cybersecurity.
The largest army, the largest navy in the world. Tonight, the United States is talking about China in the way it's wanted to for a while. Old alliances with the UK and Australia now have a new focus.
Breaking news, United Front, Australia, America and the UK in a great wall against China.
This partnership was Australia's idea, and from behind the morning TV news desks of Sydney a short time ago,
Our submarine program will go nuclear.
the cross-continental partnership was revealed to the nation. It will get nuclear-powered submarines, although when and quite how are less clear. These aren't new relationships, of course, but the partnership called AUKUS aims to deepen security and defence cooperation between the UK, the US and Australia. Beyond the nuclear-powered subs, diplomats say there will be more integration of science and technology, industrial bases and supply chains. And in the future, they'll cooperate more on artificial intelligence, cyber and so-called undersea capabilities. The Allies refer to the Indo-Pacific, when really they mean China. Of immediate concern is the potential invasion of Taiwan. The island's military practices defending itself just in case. But there are other worries, particularly for the Australians. And complications too. It's ditched a deal to build a dozen French-designed submarines.
As we know, the position in the Indo-Pacific is deteriorating. And as we know, only together with the United States, with the United Kingdom, with our Five Eyes partners, otherwise can we provide the true effect to protecting our nations and our people.
After America's withdrawal from Afghanistan, it's becoming clear where it might see its future priorities. Attention has so quickly moved from the runway at Kabul, but after what amounted to a defeat to the Taliban, pushing back against China is a challenge on a different scale.
Well, we can cross to Washington now and hear a few words of the President who started speaking a few minutes ago.
5 treaty allies and other close partners in the Indo-Pacific, as well as allies and partners in Europe and around the world to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific and build a future of peace, opportunity for all the people of the region. We're joining together, our partnerships are getting stronger. This is what we're about. I want to thank you all, and I look forward to seeing both of you in person very soon, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you from the President there to the Prime Minister and also the Prime Minister of Australia, who were either side of the President there. And Rohit, thankfully, is one side to me here to take us through what we've learned. It's so helpful when we come on air and they're already talking. But what do we know and what do you make of it?
Well, this was an unprecedented TV address. We didn't quite see it there, but the three leaders were at podiums in TV screens right next to each other. I don't recall us seeing anything like this before. I think they're trying to turn the page 20 years on from 9/11, this really marks the moment that the US and its foreign policy actually attempts to do what it's been talking about for so long, which is to challenge what it perceives to be a serious threat from China, what the UK and Australia also perceive to be a serious threat from China, not just in Taiwan, but in the South China Sea and elsewhere as well. The capacity to do this is in part freed up by withdrawal from Afghanistan. That is why that is so important in this story. But of course, as we know, the threat from Afghanistan is now focused, according to the Americans, on counter-terrorism. And it may well be that some event in the near future in Afghanistan forces the US to refocus on what's going on there. And that may well affect their capabilities to look at what's happening around China and what it calls the Indo-Pacific.
OK, right. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, the pandemic upended the UK economy in March last year and has made it unpredictable, of course, ever since. Last month's jump in inflation was the biggest on record. It went from 2% in July to 3.2% in August. The virus's role this time? Well, in August last year, people were eating out. To help out, remember that? It halved the cost of a cheap meal. Fast forward then to last month. Meals out were full price again, so well up year on year. Also still on the rise, the cost of a second-hand car because of that shortage of new ones.
£21,000 I've got in the hall and 21,200 online.
Something quite extraordinary is happening. The price at which used cars are changing hands is going up. At this auction, they are shifting cars for 20% more than they were just 4 months ago.
And twice.
It's not normal. The impact of the COVID pandemic supply issues in terms of chip shortages on new car registrations is definitely driving used car values.
The annual rate of inflation rose from 2% in July to 3.2% in August, the largest monthly increase since 1997. The biggest driver was prices at restaurants and hotels, but increases in the prices of computer games and food and drink also drove the headline rate higher. The big picture is being distorted by the discounts offered by the government's Eat Out to Help Out scheme last August. But inflation is likely to continue its ascent in the months ahead, not least because energy bills will rise sharply in October. Upward pressure on prices is being caused by shortages of both labour and products. Now, the Bank of England says there's not much it can do about either of these things. It can't magic up people to drive lorries or components to put in new cars, but it does believe that these problems and this period of high inflation will be short-lived.
Concrete's gone up 20% in the last year. I was paying £460 a tonne for steel and I'm now paying £800.
This construction company says there's no sign yet that inflationary pressure is easing. It's hard to quote for building work if prices keep rising. Presumably you're having to pass some of these costs on.
Yeah, everything's getting passed on, so I presume it's going to end up being paid for by the end user.
High inflation hits those on the lowest incomes the hardest. Natasha Bell is a single mum who's having to contend with rising prices and a fall in her income. Universal Credit is about to become £20 a week less generous.
It means I'm going to have to make some sacrifices with regards to, shopping and, the quality of products that I buy, So, yeah, it makes a difference to me and it makes a big difference to my children.
The Bank of England thinks a temporary squeeze on our living standards is unavoidable. But if inflation is to be tamed, then vacancies must be filled and supply bottlenecks cleared. Joel Hills, News at 10.
Shamima Begum, who ran away as a schoolgirl to join so-called Islamic State, certainly has her work cut out to be allowed back to the UK one day. That hasn't stopped her trying, though. She's given an interview to Good Morning Britain from Syria saying she was sorry, she wants to come home, and she's changed. She certainly looked different, hair down, bare shoulders and a baseball cap instead of a hijab. But there was a flash of Shamima's more familiar defiance too. She said she'd help Britain in the fight against terrorism because, she said directly to the Prime Minister, "You don't know what you're doing."
Walking through the Al-Roj camp, the 22-year-old is unrecognisable in her baseball cap with free-flowing hair and painted nails. Shamima Begum's face mask reads, "Give me space." She insists it's more than a cosmetic change.
I've not been wearing hijab for maybe more than a year now. I took it off for myself because I felt very constricted in the hijab. I felt like I was not myself. If ISIS were to come back now, if they were to come to the gates right now and say who wants to join us, and whoever doesn't join us will kill them, I would rather die. I would rather die than go back to ISIS.
Shamima arrived on the Syrian border soon after the collapse of the Islamic State group. She was cradling her newborn son, who died weeks later, the third child she'd lost. She attempted to excuse terrorist outrages, including the Manchester Arena bombing, something she now regrets.
I am asking the British people to forgive me because I made a mistake at a very young age. And I know it's very hard for the British people to try and forgive me because, they've lived in fear of ISIS, they've lost loved ones.
She left with two other schoolgirls from East London, aged 15, but claims they played no part in terrorist crimes.
If you really think I did do this, why don't you bring me back and put me on trial and hear my side of the story? If you honestly believe that, don't you think I deserve to go to jail for it?
In 2018, ITV News told Shamima she could never return, as the British government had revoked her citizenship.
Please find enclosed papers that relate to a decision taken by the Home Secretary.
A decision the former Home Secretary stands by.
When I saw what I did and the information that I received from my advisors, from our intelligence agencies, it was in the end, it turned out for me, it was a very clear-cut decision. And that was a decision that's been tested in the courts. It's gone right up to the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, and they ruled in favour of that decision unanimously.
This former ISIS bride believes she could give the Prime Minister some valuable advice.
You are clearly struggling with extremism and terrorism in your country. And I want to help with that, with giving my own telling you my own experience with these extremists and like what they say and how they persuade people to do what they do and to come to places like Syria. I think I could very much help you in your fight against terrorism because you clearly don't know what you're doing.
A forlorn hope unless she can win the fight to get back her British passport. Juliet Bremner, News at 10.
The legal argument over whether Prince Andrew has or hasn't been served with the civil lawsuit for alleged sexual assault looks to have been settled. Virginia Giuffre's lawyers have asked the High Court in London to make sure that he receives it. Prince Andrew has consistently denied all the allegations. Of course, our Chris, our royal editor, is here. So does this mean he actually gets these papers then? What happens next?
Pretty much, yes. I mean, when on this programme on Monday we told you about the latest court case in New York, a lot of the time in that court case we listened into was spent between Prince Andrew's lawyers arguing with Virginia Giuffre's lawyers, his accuser, over whether or not the papers had officially been served on him. The closest that Virginia Giuffre's lawyers had got was giving it to a police officer at the gates of his residence at Royal Lodge in Windsor. Well, the judge gave them a bit more time, and Virginia Giuffre's lawyers have used that time to apply to the High Court. Now, the High Court said today that they have accepted the request for service, the service of papers, and whilst it has not yet been served, the High Court will now take steps to serve those papers, unless, of course, they said the two lawyers can do it between them. So, yes, it probably now means that he's going to get these papers. His legal team kind of accepts that. Prince Andrew remains in Balmoral at the moment, staying with the Queen. And it basically means the clock has now started ticking and he has to decide whether to contest the allegations or claim, as I think his lawyers will do, that she doesn't have a case. But as you say, he maintains that he never even met her and denies the allegations.
OK, Chris, thank you for that. Now, an opening night on Broadway is a big occasion at any time. 18 months on from when the curtains came down and the lights went out, 4 of the biggest musicals opened up again last night to real excitement. Hamilton, Wicked, Chicago and The Lion King were back in show business. The circle of Broadway life complete once again.
The lights of Broadway have burned bright for more than a century. The escapism of the stage offering a respite from reality. Yet there was no respite from the realities of COVID, the pandemic closing theatres for 18 months. Not even world wars brought the curtain down for that long. Now, finally, Broadway is back.
Are you ready? Yeah, come on.
And there's great excitement.
It's making me so happy. So awesome. We're very excited. What do you think, I'm really excited. It's really awesome. It's so cool.
Hamilton is one of the first shows to return.
One at a time. One at a time.
A big moment for its fans and creator Lin-Manuel Miranda.
How are you feeling?
Great.
What's it mean tonight?
Everything. The stage is a place of creativity once more.
For the first time, I'm thinking past tomorrow. And I am not throwing away my shot.
Cast and crew reunited with their audience. And that audience is at full capacity.
Proof of ID, vaccination card out. Is everyone excited?
It's taken months of planning to get to this stage. Now, in this new world, you need more than just a ticket to get into the theatre. You have to have a COVID vaccination document or a negative test. You have to wear your mask all the way through, and the cast and crew will be tested at least 3 times a week. With COVID cases rising by 170,000 a day, reopening has been a big decision for creative teams.
The amount of loss is almost incalculable. But tonight is the celebration of what we gain when we act safely.
That gain is emotional and economic. Broadway is a $14 billion business.
It's a boost of confidence after 18 months. It's also important because it's people in the theater industry getting back to work.
So after so long, was it worth the wait?
Oh, it was awesome!
Great.
Awesome.
Really good.
People were crying, exhilarating. It was just back. It's not back to normal. It's better than normal.
So it seems Broadway will once again offer an escape from the realities of life. Emma Murphy, News at 10, New York.
Now, for the first time in history, a rocket with no astronauts, only space tourists, is due to be launched in less than 3 hours. The SpaceX craft, as you can see, will lift off from Cape Canaveral in Florida. These are live images from there. Not surprisingly, perhaps, one of the 4 on board is a billionaire, but Jared Isaac, and his 3 companions will go higher into space and for longer than Sir Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, did on their flights.
It's not hyperbole to say this is a bold new chapter in space travel. In a few hours, this SpaceX crew will blast off from Cape Canaveral, and although they've undergone months of training, there isn't one professional astronaut among them. They are all civilians.
What they're about to do will change the game entirely.
A slick Netflix documentary is being released about the mission, Inspiration 4, showing the moments the crew found out they'd been picked.
You're selected. So you're going to go to space. We're all going to. Oh my God!
As well as pushing the boundaries of space tourism, the mission will also raise millions for a US children's research hospital, where one of the crew recovered from cancer as a child and now works to help others.
Surviving cancer made me tough, and I think it taught me a lot about going out of my comfort zone.
You're going to be experiencing 4.5 times your own body weight.
One of the crew is a tech billionaire, Jared Isaacman, who's bankrolling the entire trip. But unlike Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson, his space tourism adventure will be for longer and at a far higher orbit. Space experts think this could be just the beginning of a new era.
And this idea of opening it up to more civilians that have perhaps come from a more wide variety of backgrounds really is showing this opportunity that space is slowly becoming somewhere that, anyone might get the opportunity to explore.
Rather like one of Elon Musk's Tesla cars, the spacecraft is equipped with a sophisticated autopilot, meaning if all goes to plan, the crew should be able to largely sit back and enjoy the view 360 miles above Earth. Dan Rivers, News at 10.
Safe travels to them. And finally, before construction work on HS2 carves its way through the Buckinghamshire countryside, archaeologists have been given the chance to check and catalogue what lies in its path. When they began to excavate the ruins of a Norman church near Stoke Mandeville, they found 3,000 bodies. But that wasn't all. Below the Norman church was an even older one from Anglo-Saxon times, with walls so thick it could have had a tower, and no one knew it was there.
For centuries, it was thought the Normans had been the first to build a church on this site in Buckinghamshire, but after 6 months of digging, archaeologists have discovered something very special, an Anglo-Saxon structure around 1,000 years old. Site manager Tom Swanwick says it appears to be a church tower.
You can see here from this piece of wall and from the pieces of wall up there that the actual wall itself is about 1 metre wide.
And so the Saxon building itself is actually quite small?
Yeah, it's actually quite small. It's only about 4 metres by 4 metres that you could walk around.
The old St Mary's Church was demolished in the 1960s and is now on the route of the HS2 track. So before construction can start, much of the excavation work here has involved removing around 3,000 skeletons from graves near the building. What they've found has surpassed expectation.
We'd always kind of hoped there'd be something earlier on this site to help explain what's going on. So when we actually found something, it was hugely exciting. Everyone's going, oh yay, we found it. What's it going to be? What else are we going to find? Yeah, huge excitement.
And that means historians will have to think again about what was here before this building and who was using the land near Stoke Mandeville.
The siting of the church itself was a little bit strange. It is sitting in the valley floor. And so we were unsure, was this because the church, the Norman phase of the church at least, was the centre of a deserted medieval village. But this earlier structure is showing that this, the mound that this sits on in the valley floor has some other significance to it.
Amongst other finds are a coin from the time of Ethelred the Unready, who died in 1016. But plenty of Roman artefacts have also been found, meaning there could be even more forgotten history waiting to be unearthed. Martha Fairley, News at 10, Buckinghamshire.
And that's it from all of us here on the News at 10 team for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.